We see Tesla shares under a little bit of pressure, but this after the company out last night, beating on the top and the bottom line. Of course, the broader market, as we can also see on our screen, in the red as we get today's trading session underway, coming off that record close yesterday. Joining us now to talk a little bit more about Tesla's most recent quarter is Emmanuel Rosner, lead auto and auto technology analyst over at Deutsche Bank. So let's just start with how you guys are thinking about the most recent quarter for Tesla in a world where every company is talking about chip shortages and Tesla, as they outlined last night, managing to come through that in pretty decent shape.
Yes, thanks for having me. We thought it was very, very impressive. I think investors' expectations were actually quite high going into the quarter, thinking they could beat, but that would have been based on pricing. In fact, where they actually beat was on the cost performance. The gross margins were really strong, 3 full points ahead of where the street and we were. And that really reflects relentless focus on improving the unit economics, essentially making the cost of these electric vehicles lower and lower, even versus last quarter. It's just an extremely impressive achievement. And so they really beat on cost performance. That's something that really showcases the lead that they have versus the competition. 15% operating margin, excluding stock-based compensation. That's best in class in the automotive industry, and especially at the mass market level. So we truly think this is about their low cost. This is about the superiority in battery technology, and it seems like there's quite a bit more to come in 2022.
Emmanuel, Elon joked a little bit about this on the earnings call last night about potentially building a chip factory, on why that would take a long time. But if the electric cars are in fact the future and they're going to ramp up production of more vehicles outside of their sedans, why shouldn't they build their own chip-making facility?
I think that there's a few things. I think that Tesla has obviously their hands very full between the amount of additional vehicle capacity they're adding with Austin as well as Berlin, all ramping up on track to be before the end of this year. That will add tremendous amount of vehicle capacity. And they're also ramping up their own battery cells capacity, which will start next year and potentially reach 100 gigawatt hours or so before the end of 2022. So this is already a tremendous amount of effort, should support a very large amount of growth. Obviously, this is supported by a fairly efficient use of capital, but I think everything is essentially this kind of choice. You sort of have to ensure you're able to support the growth, but at the same time, you also have to see where it makes the most sense to invest your capital. I would say, back to your earlier comment, Tesla has done a spectacular job in the second quarter in a very, very challenging supply chain environment to actually produce as much as they possibly can, almost maximizing capacity utilization. So this has actually probably been one of the toughest quarters from a supply chain, especially semiconductor. They managed actually quite well, very, very nimbly. And so maybe it's just not their first priority.
Emmanuel, it's Julie here. It feels like Tesla has sort of hit another maturation phase, right? That they are sort of have hit benchmarks like you're talking about in terms of cost control. What do you think is the long-term sales growth of this company, this is sort of sustainable sales growth?
So it's interesting, because I think we're going to see an acceleration before the maturation phase that you actually speak about. I think this is where investors are maybe not paying full attention here, but next year's growth, so 2022, will likely be north of 50%, potential upside all the way to 100%. If you see the amount of capacity that's already on the ground, that's probably 1.1 million units. And then they're adding 2 additional factories, which will be done before the end of this year. That probably takes their capacity to 1.7 million units. That's close to a doubling in terms versus the production expected this year. And Elon Musk also said on the call yesterday that they've ordered a doubling in terms of number of cells they're going to get, battery cells they're going to get from suppliers. So they're certainly planning for potential doubling of their volume in 2022. I think the street is well below that. So are we for now, conservatively, but there's quite a bit of upside. So I would say there will definitely be a mature phase. I think this is not it for now. I think that between the new plants as well as the new products, Cybertruck, semis, I think that we're going to see an acceleration as you move into 2022. Beyond that, Tesla's view obviously is about a 50% CAGR. That's probably made up of some above average years like next year and even this year, and then some lower average, we probably have them at about 30% or so on an ongoing basis. But that's just from the vehicles. When you sort of see also the opportunity for other areas of the business as well as software, I think they could still do much better on the earnings growth front.
Elon saying that he will no longer be no longer going to be on the earnings calls. Is that him signaling that perhaps he's starting to think more about succession planning, and then he has to let these other executives shine, and then ultimately he may follow the Jeff Bezos route, and perhaps he could be the executive chairman within 5 years?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's a very, very clear possibility. From the outside, it seems his involvement has never been higher. So he's still involved in every single detail, still involved in every single decision. He portrayed this decision no longer to be on the earnings call, more as an efficient use of time. If it's just to answer analyst questions, a lot of people are very qualified to do it. He would still be running the company. But yeah, we can't help but think that obviously you need to sort of nurture, continue nurturing talent, making sure that this is a company that's sustainable, even when he's not doing everything on a day-to-day basis. And so that's probably part of this natural progression. I don't think that this is something that's imminent. I think that in the near term, it's really mostly about getting back some of his time so he could work on the multiple project. Longer term, yeah, absolutely. The fact that Tesla could do well without him, or at least without his day-to-day involvement, would actually be a very, very positive for the stock.
All right, we'll leave it there. Emmanuel Rosner, lead auto and auto technology analyst over at Deutsche Bank. Thanks so much for jumping on this morning.
Thanks for having me.
New Jersey has seen its new number of infections jump by more than 150% over the last 2 weeks, while hospitalizations have jumped roughly 20%. Let's bring in our first guest for the hour. We've got New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy joining us today, along with our very own Anjalee Khemlani. And Governor, it's always great to have you on the show. New Jersey, of course, we're highlighting today, but certainly no exception in seeing the uptick in cases, especially among those who are not vaccinated. How are you processing these numbers right now? And at what point do you say we're going to bring back those restrictions that we had in place at the height of the pandemic?
Good to be back on with you. Thank you for having me. Nothing to report, by the way, on our quarterly earnings. In terms of the pandemic, you're absolutely right in terms of the uptick, but I would say two things, other than it's concerning for sure. Number one, it is an uptick from a very low level. So we're now 400 and something people in the hospital. Our peak of April of last year was 8,270. We were 10 times where we are today in January of this year. So we're very concerned. We're watching it, but the good news is we started at a low level. And secondly, it is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. We think in the hospital, it is literally 99.99% likely that the folks who are in the hospital are unvaccinated. So we are still out there going door to door, using our bully pulpit, using contests, whatever we can use to get to people, to get them to get vaccinated. We're making, we're among the most vaccinated states in America. We are the most vaccinated big state in America, but we're still not yet where we need to be, and we'll stay at it.
Speaking about that, Governor, again, good to speak with you. Tell me about the discussions that are happening, maybe about vaccine mandates. We know that California and New York have implemented them. Have you had discussions about doing that as well?
Good to see, Anjalee. Listen, everything is on the table. I would just put it that way. We have to have everything on the table. The virus dictates the terms here, not me or anybody else. And we watch the science and the data like a hawk. We'll continue to. I noted, as you suggest, both New York and California taking steps. We're hearing the same things you are in terms of the potential action by the CDC. You got to leave everything on the table. We have come such a far way. And overwhelmingly, folks have done the right thing. And because they've done the right thing, they are overwhelmingly protected against this virus. So we've opened the state up. We want to make sure we get this balance right, and we'll continue to try to do that every day.
And Governor, as you mentioned, I mean, we have come a long ways, but now, I mean, the Delta variant and the stats coming out of it, obviously concerning if you think about close to about 30% efficacy in that Israeli study when it comes to the Pfizer vaccine in transmission. You're right to point out hospitalization still down and working on that front. But I mean, just as you kind of assess, and if we do return to federal mask mandates coming through here, I mean, what's kind of the appetite in there, New Jersey, when it comes to maybe reinstituting some of these things, if indeed cases continue to rise?
Yeah, I mean, two things, Zach. Number one, just because you're fully vaccinated does not mean you can't get COVID, because you're seeing breakthrough cases. We're seeing them here in New Jersey. You're seeing them all around the world. But, and this is the important point, it is overwhelmingly, the vaccines are overwhelmingly effective against hospitalization or worse. And that's the important point to underscore. What's the appetite? Not much, as you can imagine. People have had it with this pandemic. I mean, they've come through. We've paid an enormous price in New Jersey, well over now, bearing down on 27,000 losses of life, month after month of folks doing the right thing, whether you're a small business, a restaurant, or an individual. While there are always knuckleheads out there or people who are just behaving in a way that is not consistent with the facts, overwhelmingly in our state, people have done the right thing, but they're tired of this. And who could blame them? The mental health toll has been significant. The toll on our economy has been significant. So we'll do what we need to do. But in terms of appetite from the man on the street, it's low. And who could blame them, particularly if they're fully vaccinated and they've done the right thing?
Governor, I want to follow up on that question Anjalee just asked about a potential vaccine mandate. You mentioned everything is on the table. Clearly, from a state perspective, you've got to be watching a number of variables, but I wonder what specifically you're waiting for. What will it take for you to say, look, this is it. We've got to get the mandates in place, at least from state employees, to set an example or at least get the ball rolling? What are the variables you're watching?
Yeah, not all settings are created equally, as you can imagine. So we oversee a hospital, University Hospital in Newark. That's a different reality. Or psychiatric hospitals that we operate, or prisons that we operate. So if it's a healthcare setting, if it's a vulnerable community, that's something where we're already at a very aggressive posture. It won't be one data point, and it hasn't been since the get-go. The biggest X factor is continuing to get the percentage of our population vaccinated. So that's our huge focus right now, and it has been for months. We look at a collection of health metrics, and we'll continue to do that. The one thing we cannot allow, which we came close to in April of 2020, we cannot allow our healthcare systems, our hospitals, to get overrun. Thankfully, as we sit here now, we're far from that, thank God, and God willing, we'll stay that way. So it's not one answer, it's not one moment in time, but we watch all of this, and if we have to pull a lever, we'll pull it.
Governor, I know that a lot of focus has been put on health equity as well, and the idea that you need to really put in more outreach efforts to make sure that those who don't readily have access to the vaccines do so. At what point do you think that those efforts maybe need to stop, and that everyone who wants a vaccine or is willing to get it will have gotten it, and you need to sort of wrap that up and move on?
Yeah, I mean, we've got pretty specific, as you can imagine, data that guides us in terms of our penetration into communities, particularly Black and brown communities, where there are rightful reasons for folks not to have been vaccinated. Of the folks who are not vaccinated yet, who are eligible, there's a block of folks who are believing myths. They're listening to talking heads or social media, and that's really frustrating. But there's also a block of people who are not vaccinated for very valid reasons. They may not speak English. They're concerned that their immigration status will be held against them. They think that it costs a lot of money. They may work 2 or 3 jobs. They may not know where the nearest location is. We've got almost 1,500 locations as I sit here in New Jersey today, but they may not know that. So, are there diminishing returns? Yes, there are as you go forward through time. but we're still not where we need to be as it relates to equity, Anjalee, or the overall program. So we're going to stay at it. I think we're knocking on doors today in 33 communities in the state, and I venture to say about 26 of them are majority communities of are majority Black or brown communities in the state, and we'll stay at it.
Governor, if we can switch to what you're seeing from a macro level as we try to get a better pulse of where the economic recovery stands right now. We've spoken to a lot of businesses who have raised concerns about rising costs, particularly around labor and the tight labor market right now, having to raise wages, add incentives. What are you seeing in your state? Where do things stand from a top-down view?
Yeah, a similar reality. The economy is booming, which is a great thing. Although this variant and the pandemic generally is a risk to that recovery. We needed this recovery desperately. We had 30% of our small businesses closed. Thankfully, a bunch of them are reopening. We had 2 million unemployment benefit claims. So we need this recovery. But the recovery in New Jersey, I think this is true in America, is well out ahead of the labor market. And there are, I think, a number of reasons for that. And you're absolutely right. When I speak to restaurant owners or bar owners or small businesses, they're trying a lot of different things. They're including paying up for labor. I think there is, for all of the factors that go into this sort of lagging labor market, I do subscribe to the economists who have the view that there's also a positive element to this, in the sense that when you have an economy that's recovering at such a breakneck pace as ours is, you get folks who leave a job or don't go back to a job with a positive spin as opposed to a negative one when the economy is going down. In other words, they have confidence that they can upsell themselves, upskill themselves to a more fulfilling, higher paying, more value-added job. And I think you're seeing a significant amount of that going on as well.
And Governor Murphy, to wrap up here, another key sector coming online there in New Jersey, something you pushed for when it comes to the legalization of marijuana, about a month away from your guys' regulatory commission moving forward with the laws around how it's going to be built out. You got municipalities there now kind of choosing whether or not they want to allow it or not in their town specifically. When you look at that and kind of the month timeline you're operating here to get to that next step, what is the timeline you're expecting to see for recreational sales to come on? And I guess, how is that process going in your mind as you try and get it off the ground?
Yeah, good question, Zack. It's going well. The commission, which is promulgating the rules, and they've got till the end of August to get those out there. They're working morning, noon, and night to get there. As a reminder, I got to supporting this because of social justice. And so equity runs through all of their deliberations. That runs through all of my passion for why we're doing this. Will it create jobs, new businesses, revenue for the state? Absolutely. I'll take all of that. We need it. But most importantly, it is allowing us to address enormous social injustices, racial injustices that have existed for far too long. I think, Zack, two quick footnotes. Medical marijuana dispensaries, of which we have many, I suspect, assuming that they can prove that they've got a stable supply for their clients, they'll get to be selling recreational before, that's probably a matter of months, before the standalone recreational retail establishments are up and running, and they will come online at some point after that. And obviously, folks are working morning, noon, and night, as I said, to get to this point sooner than later. We want to most importantly get this right. That's more important than the speed, but both are objectives, clearly.
Yeah, and we were chatting with Senator Cory Booker, also from New Jersey, just last week, kind of around, exactly what you're talking about, having both things aligned. The companies growing, of course, creating jobs in the sector, but also the social justice initiatives there as well. New Jersey doing both of those here. But I suppose there is that question as we wait federal changes here, kind of the idea that they are opposed, that you can't have both at the same time. What would you say to that, though, as you kind of see a bunch of companies there in New Jersey growing quickly as they prepare for recreational sales, how they aren't necessarily opposed and how you want to see both sides win, social justice and the growth you're expecting in New Jersey? Yeah.
So again, good questions. And I know our clock is short, so I'll be brief. We have also a lot of look back stuff that we've done. Expungement is a big one. And we've got, I think, the nation's most progressive and aggressive program for righting the wrongs associated with the war on drugs that have ruined too many lives, particularly young men of color. But there's no reason, as the industry gets stood up, that we cannot have it both ways. That we cannot achieve equity in who gets the licenses, where the retail establishments are located, et cetera. And at the same time have a God willing, a booming new sector to our economy. I'm extremely optimistic we'll be able to have both. We must have the former, and I believe we will have the latter as well.
All right, Governor Murphy from New Jersey, appreciate you coming on here to chat with us again. Be well, and our thanks to Yahoo Finance's Anjalee Khemlani again.
Intel laying out its future product roadmap, very key development and developments for the company. Joining us now for more on this product roadmap is Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger. Pat, always good to speak with you here. Pretty big event for you, laying out the next couple years of chip development. You say you can get back to a leadership position in the chip industry by 2025. Why are you so confident?
Well, what we laid out yesterday was a roadmap of our process innovations over the next 4 years. And what we described was basically the path back to parity. We're embracing the industry EUV technology that we actually helped create, but we weren't maximizing its use. So we're quickly putting that into the center of our process technology. And then we laid out some breakthrough innovations and this idea of the next generation transistor architecture. And Intel has a history, going way back for 25 years. The first use of strained silicon, the first use of high-K metal gate, the first FinFET. We've been about every decade we've created a fundamental new transistor architecture, and that's what we described yesterday. And we'll be delivering that. And we believe the embrace of the industry partnership, this radical new innovation of a new transistor architecture, some other new process breakthroughs as well, will put us back into a leadership position. Parity in 2024 and leadership in 2025, back where Intel belongs.
Pat, what changes have you had to make inside the organization to get the company to accelerate its product roadmap, where you can come out with a release like this and say confidently that you will be back leading the chip industry by 2025?
Yeah, and we've done restructurings. We've also given those new leaders the tools. I've given them R&D teams, expand the R&D so we can hire the best. Also the capital resources so that we can run more in parallel. What we said is normally we do a process generation every 2 years. Now we're going to do 5 generations in 4 years. So they need more capacity to run all of those experiments and those test cases to operate. So I've given them the tools. We've given the new leaders. We've brought key capabilities into the company. We've also eliminated maybe some of the arrogance that we had in the past by embracing the industry. And we announced an expansion of our partnership with ASML yesterday, a key tool provider, and relationships with IMEC, the European research, our partnership that we announced with IBM, and really benefiting from the best of the industry, as well as expanding our own capabilities and setting the torrid pace, as I've described, for our internal teams to put us back in that leadership position. And the energy, the mojo is rebuilding inside of the company. So we're feeling very excited about what we described yesterday.
It sounds like a cultural reboot of the company.
Well, I've used the words Grovian culture, where, we had sort of lost our way for a decade and made different decisions that weren't as good, weren't as focused on core technology and manufacturing. But what was old is new again. And we're going back to some of those hardcore, competitive, data-driven, engineering-centric, technology leadership perspectives that made Intel famous. And, this Grovian culture, as I like to call it, is coming back. And with that, we saw that was part of what made Intel so unique. And I was mentored personally by Andy for 35 years and really feel like I grew up at the feet of Noyce, Moore, and Grove as the founders of the company. And we're going to live in their legacy and make them proud in this next phase of the company.
How do you anticipate your key competitors responding to what you put forward last night?
Well, I think every one of them is going to say, oh, can they do it, right? They've been stumbling for a while. Yes, we can. Oh, our products are good. Well, ours are going to be better. They haven't been good suppliers lately to the different competitors or the different customers in the industry. Well, we're coming back and we're rebuilding those relationships. We saw a market increase in customer scores just over the last couple of months. We're going to compete in the supply chain where everybody's constrained. We're going to be a bit better because we have our own manufacturing as well as use the industry. So it's going to be a competitive period in the industry, but overall, it's a rapidly expanding industry. It's going to be good for everybody, and we're just going to make it a whole lot better for Intel as we go to this next phase of our journey.
And as part of this, you're announcing that you'll also be making chips for Qualcomm and Amazon. But on Qualcomm specifically, clear this up for us. Is Qualcomm a competitor, and how does that relationship work if you are in fact competing with them? Now you're going to be making their chips.
For the most part, Qualcomm and Intel, we aren't really in each other's market very much, and particularly when Intel exited the modem business a year or two ago, the areas of competition even became smaller. And with me coming in as the new CEO and Cristiano Amon coming in as the new CEO, both of us, we've spoken many times since then. We said, boy, both of us sort of looked at each other as competitors, and we really don't compete a lot today. Why don't we go forge a partnership that's deeper and more meaningful? And out of that, we're seeing great promise for greater collaboration in a variety of areas. And yesterday's announcement that they're, planning on taking advantage of Intel 20A, this breakthrough new transistor technology, and becoming a IFS and Intel Foundry Services customer was really a point in that journey that excites both Cristiano and myself. And I'm sure we're going to have more to say about this in the future. But the market was also saying, is Intel ever going to be successful with this new foundry business? And I think the combination of Amazon, Qualcomm, and over 100 customers in our pipeline for that business area is really saying, yes, they have the momentum of the industry. The industry needs more supply. Intel is stepping into that with leading edge technologies for a more globally balanced supply chain. This is good for the United States. It's good for the tech industry. It's good for national security. And this is a great step forward, and one that I'm excited to have my friend Cristiano joining me on that journey.
Qualcomm, Amazon, household names in tech, certainly. You say you have a pipeline of 100 other companies waiting to potentially use your foundries. Frame revenue. I mean, how much revenue can you generate from potentially 100 new customers, including Qualcomm and including Amazon?
Well, overall, the foundry business, there's a gestation time, because a major new design on a foundry, and as we said yesterday, Intel 20A only becomes available in 2024. So there's a fairly long cycle until designs start materializing. We have some of our modern nodes available more quickly, and we'll start seeing revenue from some of those customers as soon as next year in the packaging offerings. But it takes a while to build up that revenue stream. But overall, the foundry business today is over $100 billion market, so we're going into a large market. I've set a goal that by the end of the decade that we want to be the number 2 player in that market. So we're expecting that this becomes a large growth opportunity for Intel over that period. And yesterday's announcement was just a proof point on the way that we're making very good progress at the process, packaging, and now with some of our early customer announcements.
To service that potential demand, 100 plus customers, Pat, do you need to go out there and make a play for global foundries? There has been some reports of that.
Yeah, of course, Brian, I can't comment on the rumors in the industry. I can say more broadly that this is a big, expensive industry to play in. The R&D demands are extraordinary. The capital demands are extraordinary for it. So you can't be a little player And as a result of that, we do see that consolidation will be appropriate going forward as we see the industry players continue to refine to those that can play at these highest scales. So I do think consolidation will happen, and I think we'll be a consolidator in that journey. And we're going to continue to build out our own organic capabilities, but we're also not averse to considering inorganic opportunities as well as we go forward in this and a range of other areas.
So nothing imminent.
I can't comment further at this time, Brian. Sorry.
Fair enough. We heard a good deal last night from Elon Musk over at Tesla. He wants to make more cars, Pat, but he can't because there's no chips necessarily to go into his cars. He's also had to push back when he releases his semi-truck, his Cybertruck. When does this shortage end?
I've said that I think it's about, a year to 2 years until we start to see some reasonable balance of supply and demand. So we still have a ways to go. I do think that Q3, second half of this year, is the bottom, is the worst of it, and we'll start to see things get better as we go into next year, but we still have a ways to go. And the reason for that is it takes a while to build these factories. If I build a greenfield new fab, that's 3 to 4 years until it's producing. If we're expanding existing capacity, that's still a year or two until that occurs. And this gap, where we saw the industry demand go from 5 or 6% growth to 20% growth, with a year of disruption where supply dropped to maybe zero expansion in the COVID peak year, this created a big gap. And you're not going to get over that overnight. And clearly the auto industry has been one of the most acutely hurt, but it really is across every aspect of the business. And as I said on our earnings call, I'm struggling with my supply chains, and I would give stronger guidance if I was able to get more supply of some of our piece parts like substrates. So we're working this super aggressively. The expansions of our investments, as I'm building factories as fast as we possibly can. I'm just beating up on my construction teams, telling them, run the concrete truck 7x24. We got to go faster at getting capacity online. But you're somewhat defying the laws of physics and going too fast here. But I'll tell you, we are all over it, and we do see the challenges of the auto industry. A $30,000 car is idled for a few dollars of semiconductors. That's just politically and economically untenable. So we and the industry got to go faster to close this gap, but we still have a ways to go.
Well, go easy on those construction workers, Pat. I mean, you got to go. Come on. They're doing what they got to do here. But you see a lessening in the shortage. By early next year, things shouldn't be as severe in terms of a shortage as it is right now, right?
Yeah, I think the bottom is Q3, Q4. We're predicting Q3, right? And then it will just get better every quarter, but there's still going to be meaningful shortages through next year, and as I predicted, into 2023.
Before we let you go, I need you to debunk this. There is this view on the street that Intel is no longer innovative. It can't mount a comeback. Now that you have been inside of this company for several months, and I've been following your journey, debunk this myth for us.
Well, yesterday, right, we said, here's our packaging innovations that have us years ahead of the industry. And we just rolled out 2 major new innovations yesterday. Yesterday, we rolled out and said, hey, here's the next major innovations in process technology with ribbon FET, a once-in-a-decade kind of transistor architecture and this new power delivery network in the back end, major innovations for the industry. We also said, boy, Mobileye, those guys are crushing it. We are the leaders in autonomous vehicle technology for the industry, another area of innovation. Silicon photonics, we're way ahead of the industry in the ability to have, move from copper to photonic interconnects. We're leading the industry in this disruption of, the 5G network to move to what's called an open RAN or a standard open interface. 3 years, we're super concerned that, are we ever going to be able to innovate in the 5G area and dependence on China? Well, now the industry has adopted this technology, and Intel's the leader in delivering that innovative edge platform around Open RAN and vRAN. And these are just a few of the areas. And come up in October, we're going to have the Innovation Conference. And this is where we fling the doors of Intel Labs open wide, and we're going to have a Geek Fest. And if you come away from that Geek Fest, then we're going to throw you in a Mobileye car. We're going to show you what these transistor structures look like. And we'll probably have another dozen or so innovative announcements. If you come away from that and say Intel isn't innovating anymore, I'm going to check your pulse. Because there is so much going on inside of this company. I mean, we got PhDs and labs and researchers all over the place. And I say it's like, a CEO like myself who loves technology, right? It's sort of like, the rain coming on a desert. The flowers are blooming all over the place as we're seeing innovation, the geeks alive and well at Intel. And show up in October, Brian, and we're going to give you a Geek Fest delight.
Well, I was planning to show up in October, Pat, but you kind of got me worried with those construction worker comments. I'm just saying.
Come on down. We'll take care of you. I promise.
All right, fair enough. Go easy on me. We'll leave it there. Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger, always good to see you. Have a great rest of the week.
Long John Silver's just became the first major national seafood chain to offer plant-based seafood options. The chain has partnered with Gathered Foods, which makes Good Catch plant-based seafood. And we are joined now by Gathered Foods CEO Christine May. Christine, thanks so much for being with us. If you could just lay out this partnership you have now with Long John Silver's and what does it mean for your brand?
Well, good afternoon, Alexis. Thanks so much for inviting me to talk to you today. We are absolutely pleased to partner and be the first partner with Long John Silver's to be able to feature plant-based seafood. We started on July the 19th, and we are in test market with them at 5 different locations. It's featuring 2 of our newest innovations from our breaded line. So we're having Good Catch plant-based breaded fishless fillets and Good Catch plant-based crabless cakes. There's 5 different ways to experience it. We have a Good Catch plant-based platter. We have a filet meal. We have a crab meal. We also can offer it a la carte, either having the fish-free filet or the crabless cake. So we're really, really excited to be in this test with Long John Silver's. It's been such a pleasure to be able to collaborate because it's really all about raising awareness about plant-based seafood.
So I should then ask Christine, because some of those images looked incredibly tasty. How does the tech work really, to create this plant-based seafood?
Well, that's a great question. It has taken quite some time to be able to deliver it. One of the most important differentiating factors when you eat seafood is the texture versus, say, some of the other animal proteins. And so when you bite into seafood, you expect not something that's very hearty, but something that has a light, flaky texture. And it took us a couple of years to develop that. We want to make sure that we curate experiences for consumers that deliver a delicious taste, because if you taste good, then you're going to come back. Because people are still learning about the availability and just the whole impetus of plant-based seafood. So we really want to be able to deliver a delicious taste, an unmistakable texture that gives you that seafood experience, and also comparable protein that our consumers really, really crave. And we achieve that through our 6 legume blend. And so we have peas, chickpeas, lentils, soy, fava beans, and navy beans.
I want to talk about the addressable market here for plant-based seafood. At the moment, we're seeing higher prices for just about everything, including seafood. And some restaurants are actually taking seafood off their menu. Do you think that that's going to create an opportunity for your products?
I think it's a great question. We have this, what I would call the pandemic effect, right? And the pandemic effect has really affected people, consumers, businesses. I think the fortunate thing for our supply chain, it has got, it's very, very closely monitored and verified to have great product integrity. And I think that certainly we have the option to be this alternative to the animal proteins. It is also enabling us to raise awareness, right? To reduce harm, preserve environmental resources. So there's no anxieties about mercury or toxins, bycatch, or even overfishing. So we are absolutely looking forward to have a broader presence on many, many different menus.
Christine, I want to ask you about price, because this is something that we've heard, essentially levied at Impossible and Beyond, for example, about how their products are more expensive than the meat alternatives that they can get. And I'm on the website right now for Good Catch, and I'm just noticing, for example, some of those tuna pouches. They run about $1 in the grocery store. And on your site, they're $3.50 for one pouch, and that's the one that's on sale. They're even more expensive, $5 for some of the other varieties. That's a pretty big difference, at least when it comes to the price. Are you envisioning that the prices will always stay here? Is there work to make sure that there is lowering some of those costs for the consumers? And what do you say to those consumers who say, frankly, $5 for a pouch of plant-based tuna just really isn't economically feasible?
We are a startup right now. And so we have some controlled presence in many different regions. But in order for us to be able to achieve true scale, that's at that moment, I think that's when we'll be able to adjust prices, because we need scale. As a startup, we do have specific demands on kind of our own P&L, but we want to be able to offer the value for our consumers to first experience it. And as more and more consumers experience us, not only in the U.S. but around the world, we'll be able to drive that scale, to be able to drive that volume, and be able to offer that and pass that savings on to the consumers.
I want to ask you quickly about the health factor. And I'm just going to use Beyond Meat as an example. I believe Impossible Foods has also come up against this. Some are saying that, they contain high sodium and saturated fats, and so that they're not perfect. What's the situation with plant-based seafood, and what are those sodium levels and fat levels like there?
Well, Alexis, it's a good question. I'd have to probably delve in and sit down with our R&D team to be able to provide the exact amounts, but I think that our process is actually very, very simple. So we are not a highly processed product, and we do absolutely look at just adding minimal flavorings to the 6 legumes that I just described earlier to be able to provide a very, very healthy option for consumers.
I think right now so many companies are really focused on targeting beef and chicken right now. Not as many right now offering some of those plant-based seafood alternatives. Are you always going to focus on fish, plant-based seafood, or are you perhaps thinking about going up against a company like Beyond or Impossible and start creating some plant-based, beef and chicken products as well?
Well, Good Catch was really founded because it's a chef-driven, innovative food brand, right? That is focused on delivering and developing very flavorful, 100% plant-based seafood, and that is our near-term commitment to our consumers. When you look at plant-based seafood, the industry, it's expected to grow about 12-fold over the next 10 years to about $1.3 billion. And for us, our first mission is to positively disrupt. And this is a wonderful white space for us to be able to propel change, so we can have this plant-based food solution that also supports ocean health. So our near-term commitment is to focus on the sea. There's over 200 to 300 different species that live in the ocean. And so there's plenty of opportunity for us to stay creative and innovative.
Real quick, Christine, what stores are you in right now? I know you got the Long John Silver's deal. That's a restaurant, but what about supermarkets?
We have a wide range of presence. It depends on really where you are sitting in the U.S. I mean, if you just put in your zip code, if you go to our website at www.goodcatchfoods.com, you put in your zip code, and then you can find where it is closest to you. But for instance, we are in Whole Foods in the ambient or the shelf stable and the prepared food sections. And we have a number of different chains that we are with at retail. But I think the best thing to do is to be able to go to the website, and you can see there's a wide variety of major chains that you're familiar with, but also natural and independents.
All right, Christine May, CEO of Gathered Foods. We appreciate your time today.
Hi, Dr. Ellen Hall. Really great to see you again, of course, on the show. Really, this news, of course, is really interesting for a lot of folks who have been concerned about the Delta spread. And so I have actually a two-part question for you, both wearing the hat of the CEO of a hospital as well as the former commissioner. Looking at this in terms of not just mask mandates, but also vaccine mandates that have been coming down the pike, what are your thoughts on whether or not this needs to be pushed a step further to mandates, whether at the federal level or even in New Jersey?
Well, thanks again for having me on. The first thing I'll say is that this new guidance is certainly welcome given the rapid spread of the Delta variant of COVID-19. And we're already starting to see case increases even in highly vaccinated states like New Jersey. And there's been concerns now for a number of weeks and months about what the Delta variant can do to community spread. And so I think really reminding folks that wearing masks can limit the spread, especially in the face of the Delta variant, is important. As far as vaccine mandates go, we've done so in our hospital. In fact, the due date for initiation of vaccination for all of our employees is in just a few days, and we've seen substantial compliance without, of course, that didn't happen by accident. We've been doing a lot of outreach. Every supervisor, manager has been talking to our employees. I've had lunches with concerned, unvaccinated people trying to dispel misinformation. I do think places of business should consider that, especially hospitals and healthcare settings who see vulnerable patients every single day.
Doctor, are you starting to see those who might have spoken out against getting a vaccine? I don't want to use the word secretly, but perhaps quietly coming in to get the vaccine. There was a report of that on another news organization.
I've actually had friends who've been hesitant about the vaccine since they've come out, text me in the last few days to say they got the jab, pictures of themselves getting it, saying that they're concerned about increased spread in their own communities and loved ones and community members, family members getting the disease. And so that was reinforced today by Jeff Zients and the White House COVID team, who did announce that the biggest growth in vaccination levels have been in the most hesitant states and regions of the country to date. All of that is very rational and expected when you're seeing your community get infected. And so I am really pushing everybody I can personally and professionally in our community and all of our influencers in our hospital as well to get more folks vaccinated.
Doctor, this is Emily. I'm wondering, as we've seen concern over the Delta variant continue to rise, we've been hearing about an increasing number of individuals, both in the U.S. and outside the U.S., mixing and maxing vaccines, trying to get more protection potentially. I guess a two-part question. Number one, is this advisable? And number two, is this actually safe, and has this method actually been tested?
So thank you for asking that. I will say that it's certainly not advisable until the FDA authorizes the use of boosters through an EUA or otherwise before you get a third dose. We don't yet have the definitive final data on that. We haven't had our scientists and regulators in the federal government who have all the data in front of them make that decision. I will say, though, that we are seeing concerning case increases and concerning increases in breakthrough infections in folks who have been fully vaccinated, especially in folks who've been vaccinated earlier on. So we are starting to see more people in our emergency room coming in with COVID-19 despite being vaccinated, and the majority of them have been vaccinated much earlier on since the vaccines were released to the public. And so I wouldn't be surprised if a booster is recommended. In fact, data published recently out of Israel shows that vaccine effectiveness, even for Pfizer, which is among the most effective of the vaccines, goes down over time and is most likely to go even further down with the development of the Delta variant. So I would say prepare, make sure you're informed, but there is currently no FDA authorization for the use of a booster.
Dr. Hall, you mentioned that you've seen those coming in among those that were vaccinated earlier. So with this news now from the CDC, with this data of the rare breakthroughs in the transmission, does that make you concerned that you're going to start seeing, the surge hit a new peak, possibly reflecting what we saw earlier in January?
Well, Anjalee, we're in close contact with the state health department as one of the 3 regional level 1 trauma centers who've been assisting the health department with pandemic management, especially around hospitals. And we have that very close working relationship because of the ever evolving situation with this pandemic. There are projections that do show case increases especially in the northern region of New Jersey kicking in as soon as possibly next month. And it could be even sooner with the rapid spread of the Delta variant. And needless to say, we're prepared and we're in a constant state of preparation with 90 days of PPE, a surge plan for both personnel and where to put patients in the hospital safely and effectively, a surge plan for testing. And we're always now in a state of readiness in case this happens. But it's certainly concerning for our healthcare workforce who have really been stressed for 18 months straight now, and does concern me that we still have a lot of room to go to vaccinate the rest of our community. So that remains our focus, but we are prepared, knowing that projections do show case increases.
Doctor, based on what you just said, we're witnessing in Florida, hospitals are at capacity. Is there any kind of plan to send healthcare workers from here to those areas which now are overloaded?
Well, I know that every hospital system and health system is looking at their staffing every single day like we are. And you do have a large workforce of traveling nurses and traveling healthcare providers who can fill in those gaps. But my concern, because we're seeing all 50 states now have case increases, 2/3 of counties in this country overall have case increases, that we may not be able to rely on a traveling workforce for healthcare. And in fact, we're planning as much as we can to not have to rely on a traveling workforce, because if the entire country is experiencing case increases, that's obviously not going to be as ready of an option. So I've said from the beginning in this pandemic that staffing remains the most important risk. It has everything to do with your capacity and your ability to provide care. And so we're very intently focused on that.